Okay, we are right at 10 o'clock, so we will get this going. If you've not met me before, my name is Madeline Shires, and I am the SDSU Extension Plant Pathology State Specialist. Also on today is Connie Shrunk, and I will introduce her, and she can pop on, add anything else in, but she is our plant pathology field specialist who is based out of Sioux Falls. Today, we are going to be talking about wheat disease management, and our guest speaker is Dr. Meriem Aoun from Oklahoma State University. And I'll let her further introduce herself here in a second. But just a couple of like South Dakota specific updates is that last year we saw stripe rust at pretty high levels all across the state in both winter and spring wheat. So if you don't usually look for that disease, it would be one to kind of keep looking for in 25 because it's been forecast to be for 2025 to also be a heavy stripe rust year. And then the other one is just remember that we do have to keep a really close eye on the weather at the time of flowering for management of FHB. We've got a few reports of people having dawn issues in their spring wheat. It didn't really show symptoms, but the weather conditions were right at flowering and infection did occur. And I'm sure Miriam's going to probably cover a lot of that today. But yeah, just a couple of reminders and we will get going, and feel free to ask questions in the Q&A or the chat as we go, and we will get those answered at the end. And with that, I will pass it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Dr. Shires, for the invitation to this webinar. My name is Meriem Aoun, and I am a small grains pathologist at Oklahoma State University. I started my position here at OSU in January of 2022, so I just completed my third year. And my appointment is 70% research and 30 extension. So I'm also the state extension specialist for wheat diseases. So this is the outline of the talk. I will give you an overview about the different wheat diseases that we see in Oklahoma, but also they are, I'm sure that you see many of them, and also in South Dakota. And on the different management strategies, we'll talk about cultural practices, the deployment of resistant varieties, and then chemical control, both seed treatments and foliar fungicides. So just to give you here an idea about the different wheat classes that we grow. In the Great Plains, we grow primarily hard red winter wheat all over the Great Plains. And that's the market class that we grow in Oklahoma and also in South Dakota. And hard red spring wheat also, that we grow it in the northern Great Plains, including South Dakota. The soft red winter wheat is growing primarily in the eastern part of the US. And soft white is in the Pacific Northwest. A little bit of hard white, you see it in the central Great Plains, Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas. And durum, which is primarily in North Dakota and Montana. Disease is affected by multiple biotic and abiotic stresses. And for diseases, these are yield loss estimates in the US from 2018 up to 2023. And these are on the average across all the US states. And over the last 6 years, we see an estimated yield loss of $3.7 billion annually to the wheat industry due to wheat diseases. And that's around $622 million in losses annually. So it depends on the year. Some years we are seeing low losses due to disease, like 3% in 2023 and 2022. And that's probably due to the drought that we see in many areas in the US, and that reduces many of the fungal diseases. And in years like in 2019, you will see that we have up to 10% in yield losses. So on average, we are seeing 7%, and this is across the US. And these estimates are coming from different wheat pathologists from all over the US as part of the crop protection network. And you can scan this QR code. It will take you to basically to looking at the different states and also looking at different diseases and their impacts on the wheat industry. So in this slide, I'm showing you the different foliar fungal diseases that you can see. Leaf rust and stripe rust are very common diseases that you can see. As Dr. Shires mentioned, stripe rust was also an important disease last year in South Dakota. It was the same also in central and southern Great Plains. For us, it was a very early and severe epidemics of stripe rust in 2024. 10 spots, Septoria tritici blush and Septoria nodorum blush. So 10 spot, usually we see it on the lower canopy. Septoria tritici blush, typical signs. You can see those black structure that are called pignetia. It's usually we see it when the temperature are cooler compared to the Septoria nodorum blush, which usually show later in the season when temperatures are higher. Spot blushes are those black spots that you see on the leaves, and powdery mildew, which is this fluffy white mycelia on the leaf surface. Fungal diseases that you can see on the heads include Fusarium hemp blight, which is a major problem, I believe, in like North Dakota, South Dakota, and also in eastern part of the US. It's a problem not only because of its impact on the yield, but also because of the mycotoxin associated with this disease. Gloom blush, it's caused by the fungus Parastegonospora nodorum. It's the same fungus that can also cause the Septoria nodorum blush on the leaf. We can also see symptoms on the gloom. Other fungi that you see on the head are loose smut, which are these black powdery spores that you see on the head, or the common band. Also, it's called stinking smut, and that's because it produces that fishy odor, which distinguishes it from the loose smut that doesn't have an odor. Here are some pictures for diseases that can infect roots, including dryland root rots. This includes diseases like common root rots and Fusarium root rots. So in Oklahoma, when it was dry, especially 2022 and 2023, we see a lot of diseases, root rot diseases, and they are primarily Fusarium root rots, as shown in this picture, where you have that discoloration on the lower stem and very poor root system. And this pink discoloration is an indication of infection by Fusarium species. And also, common root rot was observed during dry conditions. And toward the end of the season, you can see this white heads. And actually, the whole plant is bleached and dead due to the infection by common root rot and Fusarium root rot pathogens. And basically, there are no seed set or very low seed set as a consequence of these root rot diseases. When it is humid, so this can be due to a lot of rain, or maybe in fields that are irrigated with low drainage, you can see diseases like take-all. So these are the black discoloration on the lower stem and very poor root system. So it depends on the conditions. If it is too humid, we suspect to see take-all. If it is very dry, we suspect to see dryland root rots, like common root rots and Fusarium root rots. About the bacteria, bacterial leaf streak is a very common disease that you see in South Dakota, and you can see symptoms on the leaves, but also the bacteria can infect the head, and here also on the stem, and you can see it even on the awns. For us here in the south, bacterial leaf streak is not a major problem. We see it some years, but we still try to breed for resistance for this disease. For viruses, barley yellow dwarf is a common virus that we see in Oklahoma. We also, and it is transmitted by cereal aphids. Soil-borne wheat mosaic virus and wheat spindle streak mosaic virus, they are transmitted by Polymyxia graminis. And we have the wheat streak mosaic complex. And Maddie mentioned to me that in 2024 in South Dakota, you also saw some issues related to wheat streak mosaic. So these three viruses, they can be transmitted all together with the wheat corn mites. So to show you some symptoms for these viruses, how they look like, barley yellow dwarf, you usually see discoloration that starts from the leaf tip. The discoloration is usually yellow to purple. And this disease or this virus is transmitted uh, by cereal aphids, mainly bird cherry oat aphids and greenbacks. With streak mosaic virus in Oklahoma, it's mainly a problem in the Panhandle area, which is in northwest Oklahoma. But in years like in 2022, we saw it in many fields in central Oklahoma as well. And this is an example of a field where about 150 acres of this grower's field were severely infected by wheat streak mosaic. And at this point, there is nothing that we can do to help with this problem. So basically, the grower had to terminate the crop. And this virus is transmitted by wheat corn mites. The mice are very small to be seen without magnification. So this is a photo under the dissecting scope. And usually they will cause the leaf to roll due to, especially if we have a high density of wheat corn mites. And this is how the symptoms looks like on the leaves. The wheat corn mice, in addition to the wheat streak mosaic virus, they can also transmit other viruses. And many times we can see wheat streak mosaic virus together with high plains mosaic virus. It used to be called the high plains disease, and the triticum mosaic virus. So these are symptoms on how this disease looks like. It's sometimes difficult to distinguish them based on symptoms. So that's why we run ELISA or PCR to do the diagnosis of the samples that got sent to us by wheat growers. In Oklahoma, we have a nursery for wheat soil-borne mosaic and wheat spindle streak mosaic virus. So now most of the varieties that we grow in the Great Plain, and I'm talking here about the hard red winter wheat varieties, they carry resistance to the wheat soil-borne mosaic. And that's actually thanks to this type of nursery. So this is a nursery that we have in Stillwater, where we do evaluation of breeding lines for their reaction to this virus complex, which is transmitted by Polymyxia graminis. But we also include in this nursery breeding lines that are coming from other breeding programs, including South Dakota State University breeding programs. And this is a disease that we usually see the symptoms early in the spring, which is around March. This is like our susceptible check that you see here that is showing the yellow symptoms. We do irrigation, and that's to help the Polymyxia graminis to transmit the virus to the roots. And then when the temperature is low, that's when we see the symptoms on the plants, on the foliage. But as the temperature increases later in the spring, these symptoms will disappear. But the varieties or the lines that are showing these symptoms or they are susceptible to this virus complex, they will have yield damage, although they don't show the symptoms later in the spring when temperatures are higher. So that's why it's for us, we have a very narrow window to do the evaluation of the breeding lines during this time when temperatures are cooler. So I will now talk about the different wheat disease management. So giving you here like talking about these different diseases, how they look like, and now how we can manage these different diseases in an integrated pest or disease management approach. So we'll start talking on the cultural practices. We'll talk first about the planting date. So in Oklahoma, we grow wheat as for both forage and grain production. So this is a dual purpose system where the grazing is allowed during winter and early spring. And then when the crop reach what we call the first hollow stem, which is usually around March, the cows are removed from the crop to allow for grain production. And because growers, they want to get as much forage for the cows, then they tend to plant early, like as early as in September, while the optimal window for planting in Oklahoma is usually in October, from October 1st to October 15th, depends where you are in the state. But planting too early in the fall, that will increase the risk of infection by virus vectors like aphids and curl mites that will infect the emerging crop in the fall. And then the symptoms won't be obvious until the spring. So although a spring infection can occur, but that fall infection usually is the most damaging to yield. So that's why it's recommended to delay planting to manage this different type of viruses, like barley yellow dwarf virus, wheat streak mosaic, the high plains mosaic virus, and the triticum mosaic virus. This is another picture from Washington State University by the wheat pathologist in there, Dr. Tim Murray, where you have two adjacent fields. And actually the growers, what he did here, he planted the first field and for whatever reason had to stop and come back later after 1 week to plant the rest of his field. And you can see that only 1 week interval was very significant in terms of the disease symptoms that you see in that early planted field. And that's because delaying planting is going to break what we call the green bridge and then reduce the population of aphids that are transmitting the viruses. This is another example from Texas. And here we have an early planted field that is severely infected by wheat streak mosaic virus and the high plain wheat mosaic virus. And then in comparison to a late planted field that has less symptoms. This is a table from my predecessor, Dr. Bob Hanger, and here I'm showing you two varieties and then the effect of the timing of infection on yield. So we have fall, spring versus non-infected wheat. And this is a scale from 0 to 3, with 3 being the most susceptible or the highest severity of the disease. And you can see here, for example, for the variety Chislom, you see that in comparison to the spring infection, we have lower reduction in yield when the infection occurred in the fall. So this shows that early infection is the most damaging to yield. And here I'm talking about winter wheat. Residue management. So in many wheat fields, we are in a low and no-till system. So although this system has its advantages, but when it comes to diseases, it's going to increase the residue on the soil. And those residue, they can carry the resting bodies of some fungi like 10 spot, which I believe is another issue in South Dakota, Septoria tritici blotch pathogens. And those are the black dots that you see here on the straws, which are the resting bodies of the fungus. It's also important to control volunteer weed and other grassy weeds. So and that is very important, especially when controlling viruses and then controlling the population of the vectors, aphids, and curl mice that transmit the viruses. So it is important to basically destroy the volunteer weeds and the grassy weeds. In a no-till system, we can use herbicides and to manage volunteer weeds before the emergence of the new crop. And when we are managing disease like wheat streak mosaic virus, we need to keep in mind that wheat is only one of the crops that are infected by this virus. We have other crops that can be infected by wheat corn mite and the wheat streak mosaic virus, like corn, oat, barley, millet, sorghum, rye, and many grasses like goat grass, sandbur, grama grass, green foxtail, barnyard grass, love grass, and smooth crabgrass, and many other annuals and a few perennials. So this makes really managing this disease a real challenge because of this wide host range for both the virus and the vector. So now coming to the genetic resistance or the host resistance. This is actually the component that I spend most of my research work studying the genes that are controlling different or resistance to different wheat pathogens. So at Oklahoma State University, these are the diseases that we are breeding for resistance. So and I'm sure that many of these are also problems in South Dakota. So fungi like leaf rust and stripe rust pathogens, those are the primary diseases that we see in Oklahoma. So the breeding programs, it's very rare to consider releasing a variety with susceptibility to both diseases. We see Septoria nodorum blotch also in some years. It's gaining importance, especially after 2019. Septoria leaf blotch and Septoria tritici blotch as well, and powdery mildew, 10 spot, spot blotch, and Fusarium hair blight. 10 spot, powdery mildew, and Septoria, we usually see them on the lower canopy in comparison to leaf rust and stripe rust. So they are considered less damaging or even have lower priority in terms of breeding compared to the leaf rust and stripe rust pathogen. Fusarium hair blight, it's not a major problem like it is in South Dakota. We see Fusarium hair blight primarily in northern and eastern part of the state. But if you remember that first map where I showed you where we grow hard red winter wheat in Oklahoma, it's mainly on the western part of the state, which is drier. But in some states, like in the north and eastern part, where growers they also produce wheat, there is an increased now production of corn, and there is a rotation actually between corn and wheat that increase the risk of Fusarium hair blight. So that's why breeding for Fusarium hair blight is more focused toward northern and eastern part of the state. Viruses, we see barley yellow dwarf. That's a main common disease that we see in Oklahoma. Wheat streak mosaic virus is also a problem in the Panhandle area, but in some years we see it in central Oklahoma. Wheat soil-borne mosaic and wheat spindle streak mosaic, those used to be a problem in the 1980s, but now most of the varieties that we have, they are resistant to this virus complex. And we also breed for bacterial leaf streak resistance, although it is not a very major problem in Oklahoma. So the OSU extension have a database for the different varieties that we grow in Oklahoma. So in Oklahoma, the top 7 wheat varieties that we grow in Oklahoma, they are coming from the OSU wheat breeding program. And this database is very helpful for the wheat growers to help them select disease-resistant varieties. And I'm sure that you have a similar data that it is available by the OSU Extension program, and that will help growers to look at the different variety characteristics like agronomics, quality, and disease resistance, and then help them to make selection for the coming years. So as I mentioned, last year was a severe stripe rust epidemics for us that came too early in the season. So this is a picture taken in Timpton, Oklahoma, which is a southwest Oklahoma. And the lines that you are seeing here, those are lines from OSU, but also we are having elite breeding lines from all over the Great Plains, including some hard winter wheat varieties coming from South Dakota State University. So here you can see the difference between varieties that are susceptible versus variety or these are elite breeding lines that are resistant to stripe rust. So it's very important to have a variety that is resistant, that will reduce the need for fungicide application. So on this graph, I am showing you the yield in bushel per acre and versus the stripe rust damage from 0 to 6. So with 6 being the highest severity of stripe rust. And this data is for breeding lines coming from 470 segregating populations. So there is a lot of genetics in here that can explain yield, but you can see as we go beyond 3 on this scale, the yield for most of these lines did not exceed 20 bushels per acre, which is very low. And on average, we saw a decrease by 5.7 bushel per acre at every 1 unit increase in the disease scale. So then you can imagine across the scale how that damage will be. The wheat community has this 3 resistant gene for wheat streak mosaic virus that the wheat breeding programs are trying to use, especially in areas where wheat streak mosaic is a problem. So for now, we have WSM1, which is, it's originated from a wheat-wide relative, which is Tynopyrum, and WSM2 that is coming from a Colorado breeding line. So the problem with these 2 resistant genes, they are not effective when temperature is equal to 24 Celsius or 75 Fahrenheit and above. So that's a problem because in many parts, like during in April, for example, where wheat is growing and where we see most of infection by wheat streak mosaic virus, temperature is above 75 Fahrenheit. Also, one problem with WSM2, it provides resistance to wheat streak mosaic virus, but not to another virus, which is triticum mosaic virus that is also transmitted by the kernel mites. And while WSM1 can provide resistance to both viruses. And these are the hard red winter wheat varieties that carry WSM1 and WSM2. WSM3 is coming from Tynopyrum, and this is the most recently identified gene. However, it's not yet in any of the commercial variety, but it is there in the breeding pipelines from Colorado, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And this resistant gene can provide resistance to wheat streak mosaic virus and triticum mosaic virus even above that 75 Fahrenheit. In addition to wheat streak mosaic virus resistant genes, the wheat breeders, they tend to also try to utilize sources of resistance to the vector, which is wheat kernel mite. And CMC4 is found to be one of the most effective resistant gene. So that's why in breeding lines, it is important to have both a combination of wheat streak mosaic virus resistance or tolerance genes and CMC4, which provides resistance to the wheat kernel mite. So here I'm using resistance and tolerance, but most of these resistant genes to the wheat streak mosaic virus are actually tolerance genes because they don't reduce the virus titer, but they reduce the symptoms that we see on the lines or the varieties they carry them. For barley yellow dwarf, one of the most resistant variety that we grow in Oklahoma that is immune to barley yellow dwarf is Uncharted. It carries 2 resistant genes that the wheat community has. So BDV1, that's the same gene that provides resistance to leaf rust, stripe rust, powdery mildew, which is LR34. It is widely used in wheat breeding in general in the US and globally. And OK Coral here in comparison, that is one of the most commonly grown variety in Oklahoma that has an intermediate response to barley yellow dwarf, but Uncharted is a completely immune or highly resistant that shows basically no symptoms of barley yellow dwarf. For Fusarium head blight, the OSU breeding program recently released a variety called Scab Striper. So this is a variety of hard red winter wheat that is carrying FHB1. So this is the first variety of hard red winter wheat to carry FHB1 in central and southern Great Plains. So in 4 years from 2020 to 2023, this variety was included in the scab nursery at Manhattan, Kansas, which is part of the U.S. Wheat Scab initiative, and then it is showing basically the lowest disease for Fusarium head blight. So ADPC, which is area under disease progress curve, and IDPS, the area under disease progress curve. So the lower the value, the higher the lower is the disease severity, and the higher is the resistance. So this is a very promising variety to grow, especially in area that are prone to Fusarium head blight, which is, as I mentioned earlier, in northern and eastern Oklahoma. Coming now to the last component, which is chemical control, I will be talking about seed treatments and foliar fungicides. So why and when do we need seed treatments? So seed treatments are used to control fall foliar diseases like leaf rust, stripe rust, powdery mildew, and this is again on winter wheat. It's also used to control bands and smuts. And then it can help to improve stands and suppress root rot diseases. And we can use it to control some pests like aphids and consequently reduce the risk of barley yellow dwarf. So this is a study done at North Dakota State University coming from 30 trials. And then we have 135 seed treatments. So the zero, this is a like comparison to the non-treated control in terms of stands. So anything above zero that shows that there is a positive impact of using seed treatments on stand establishment. So we see that many of these seed treatments, they have that positive impact on stand. And on average, we are seeing 8.2% increase in stand compared to the non-treated control. That was translated in an increase in yield. So this is the same seed treatments that I was showing in the previous slide. So the increase in stand was translated in an increase in yield and on average of 4.3%. So in this slide, I'm summarizing priorities that we can consider using seed treatment for them. So we can consider seed treatment when we have seed lots from fields that are known to have low levels of loose smuts or common bands. When we have wheat that is intended for seed production in the following years. When we have seed loss that have low germination that is caused by seed-borne fungi. And when seed loss from fields that can be infected by Fusarium head blight. And when the weather doesn't allow to plant wheat, and then growers, they need to delay planting in cool and wet soils, because that can result in some seed and seedling rots, and seed treatment can help with that. So this is a table showing the different products that we can use for wheat as seed treatments. So I got this from the OSU Extension Asian handbooks, but I'm sure that you also have this handbook with every county educator in South Dakota. And here are the list of the products and the active ingredient. So you can have only one active ingredient, like here the metalaxyl for this product, but in some products you will have more than one active ingredient for fungicide, or even a combination of fungicides and insecticide. And that's actually to increase the spectrum of control to multiple diseases and different pests as well. The second column has the rate, and then you have the disease that can be managed by the seed treatments. So here, as I mentioned earlier, some diseases that appears in the fall on winter wheat, like leaf stripe rust and tan spot, gloom blotch, powdery mildew, and some root rot like Pythium and Phytophthora. Also some pests like aphids and HM fly and wireworms if we are using an insecticide. And here is a combination of insecticide and fungicides to control buds, fall foliar diseases, and some pests like HM fly and aphids. So here I am summarizing the most frequency treatment that we use for weed disease management. Fungicides like tipoconazole, difeconazole, metalaxyl, and those are the main active ingredients for seed treatment. For insecticide, we have imidacloprid and thiamethoxam, and plant growth regulators like cytokinin, gibberellic acid, and auxins. And those, they are not going to suppress pathogens and pests, but they are going to play with the physiology of the plant and improve stand establishment and the general plant health, and that consequently help with diseases. This is a table that I got from a fact sheet from Kansas State University by Dr. Onarfi and DeWolf, and that is listing the most common seed treatments that are used in Kansas State. So again, here you can have multiple active ingredients, and that's to increase the spectrum of disease and pest control. You have the rate, and then the different diseases that can be controlled with seed treatments, like common band, smats, seed-borne fusarium. For seedling diseases, you have Pythium damping off, Rhizoctonia damping off, and root rots like common root rots, Fusarium root rots, and cyclical diseases. And fall leaf diseases like leaf rust, stripe rust, powdery mildew, septoria, etc. And the last column has a grazing restriction if we are using wheat for grazing. So for some products, we have up to 55 days grazing restriction. So C that you see here means that the product is labeled to manage this disease, and S means that the product is labeled for suppression or partial control of the disease. Here I am summarizing some suggestions for seed treatment success. First is to make sure that you select a product with the active ingredient that match the disease and pest that you are trying to control, or that you have been a problem in previous years. Also, it is important to start with well-cleaned seed because if we have chaff, that's going to reduce the uniform coverage of the seed. We need to make sure that the products have been mixed according to the label instruction and to ensure that all seed have uniform coverage. So now we'll move to foliar fungicide that we are using them during the season to protect yield potential. And it is important to do scouting to determine whether fungicide application is needed. And here I'm showing you the focus stage for wheat growth. And around tillering, around jointing, we expect to see diseases like septoria, tan spot, and powdery mildew. Around flag leaf stage, we scout usually for leaf rust and stripe rust. And when we have heading and flowering, that's when we scout for head scab. And based on the scouting, we can determine the risk. Are we at high risk to justify the need for fungicide application? Also, are we growing a resistant variety or a susceptible variety? And then look at the weather forecast and then decide whether a fungicide application is needed in the field. For some diseases like scab, we have some forecast models that are developed by the wheat community. This is an example for, I believe it was a few years back, where I looked at the risk in the US. And this model works based on weather forecasts. So it's important, especially like you are here in South Dakota, where scab can be an issue, to check this forecast model, and it will identify your risk based on weather environments. But also you can look at the variety that you are growing, whether it's the level of resistance, and then decide whether a fungicide application is needed. Timing of fungicides to manage foliar diseases. So the optimum period to apply fungicide is usually between the flag leaf and the flowering stage. So depending on the diseases, for example, if we are managing diseases like leaf rust and stripe rust, usually we apply, try to protect that flag leaf. And then if we are managing diseases like Fusarium head blight, that's when we are spraying at around flowering stage. And we need to apply fungicide prior to having a severe disease, because whatever loss cannot be regained. So it's important to spray before the disease is severe in the field. And talking here about the stages and of the crop development, and how important to the early infections on damage, on yield damage. So here is an example for leaf rust, and the percentage that you see here are the disease severity from 10 to 100% on the flag leaf. And here are the yield losses if the infection occur at flowering stage, milk stage, soft and hard dough stage. And you can see that most of the damages are actually happening early on in the crop development. So if we exceed, for example, and reach to the soft or hard dough stage, basically there is less benefits from applying fungicides, and also less damage to the crop if we have disease that occurs too late in the crop development. So where to find the information about the efficacy of the fungicide? So this is part of the crop protection network, where wheat pathologists from all over the state, they try to update fungicide efficacy based on a uniform fungicide trial that they run in different states. And if you scan this QR code, it will take you to this table where you have the different products and the active ingredient, the rate, and their efficacy in controlling these different diseases. So G is good, BG is very good, E is excellent, and NL is not labeled. And here the different active ingredients, or the different products, and their efficacy in managing diseases like powdery mildew, or Staganospora, leaf and gloom blotch, Septoria triticale blotch, 10 spot, leaf rust and stripe rust, stem rust, and the Fusarium head blight. And we have harvest restriction for each product. So make sure to read the label, make sure that you are applying the right rate, and have a product that work effectively against these diseases. So we'll talk about the residual life here, about the different fungicide products. The residual life is influenced by the chemical, the rate of application, and the disease target. But for most of the products that belong to the triazole and strobilurin classes, it's usually between 2 to 3 weeks. So basically, that's the time you will have protection against the disease. And we see some small difference in the residual life between the products, but that does not really translate in a significant effect on yield. So based on 20 years of fungicide trials, and this is data from Kansas State University, we are seeing on average an increase of yield by 10%. So that's considered a significant increase to justify the use of fungicide if needed. And actually this 10% increase is It's regardless of basically the variety that you are growing, whether it's resistant or susceptible, and the disease level. So on average, we have a 10% increase by applying fungicides. And obviously that importance of fungicide reduces when we are growing resistant varieties. So, but if you believe that a fungicide can make you go higher than 4 bushel per acre in comparison to non-treated crop, then that is considered above average, and fungicide application can be considered. Here I will be talking about split applications, because some growers, they tend to apply a first application that's usually at green up, at around the jointing stage, and then a second application at the flag leaf or flowering application, depends on the disease that you are dealing with. But sometimes there are some considerations that we have to make, whether that early application is needed. Like in years like when we have a drought, maybe it is not going to pay off, because we will have anyway reduction in yield due to the drought, and by doing a split application is not going to help. And early application also cannot substitute the flag leaf application, because only the plant part, leaves and stems and heads that are present at the time of the application will be protected. So if you, that early application is not going to help and substitute the flag leaf application. But if we consider using a split application, there are some considerations that we can make, like using a low-cost generic at the for the early application, and save the more expensive products for the flag leaf application, because flag leaf, again, is the most important part of the plant that will generate that or that will help with the seed filling. And we should make sure that we do not exceed the maximum amount of active ingredient in a single season. So if we apply early in the season and then on the flag leaf, so make sure that both applications and the amount of the active ingredient doesn't exceed what is allowed. And follow the label recommendations for application. So whether we use aerial application or ground application, we need to make sure that we have a thorough coverage, because only the parts of the plants that are protected at the time of the applications will be protected from diseases. But if you have areas or parts of the plants that are not sprayed, then they can be infected by fungi. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation, and we'll be happy to take any questions if you have.
All right, thank you so much, Meriem. That was a great presentation. We don't have any questions in Q&A just yet. We'll let people catch their breath and think about if they have any questions. One of the questions I had is, and it's kind of related to what we saw on stripe rust in 2024, is do you have experience or recommendations, for when we should make a decision to spray for stripe rust? We had some fields that probably 50 to 75% of the flag leaf were covered, and producers were trying to make a decision on if they should spray or if it was too late, or if they would really even be protecting much of their yield at that point in time.
Yeah, actually, that was the same question that we had last year from many of the producers. So unfortunately, in last year, it was a very early epidemic. So it's like talking to people who have been very long here in Oklahoma. They told me that they never see this early and severe stripe rust epidemics in 20 years. So it was obviously too early, and basically a lot of the varieties that we release from OSU breeding program, they have the resistance to stripe rust. But that resistance is only at the flag leaf stage and beyond. So it's when those are the adult plant resistant genes that are involved and they are expressed at that stage. But because it came too early, a lot of the hard red winter wheat, it's not from OSU, but also all over the Great Plains, they don't have that protection at the seedling stage. And that's why many of the growers, they have to spray fungicides. So I think it's knowing what varieties you are growing is very important. Know what are you having both seedling and adult plant resistance, and at what stage you are at. And also it's important to scout, make sure, and also the weather forecast is important to know that if that disease is going to progress more or not. So scouting, also know what varieties you are growing to make that decision. Unfortunately, we don't have yet forecast models for striped, but hopefully those models can be developed by the wheat community to help growers at least know the risk for striped. But for us, for example, we look at what is happening in Texas. If we have striped in Texas, we know that we are going to get it in a few weeks.
Yeah, and actually on the stripe rust models, I'm on a grant group and we are hopefully validating the stripe rust model over this season and next season. So we might actually have something out for like 2026 or 2027 growing seasons.
Yeah,
So
that
that
will
will
be
be
great.
really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen any other questions from our group. Oh, actually one just came in. They asked, do you know about what percentage of Oklahoma winter wheat is treated with a seed treatment product?
Not many. Actually, I had a seed treatment presentation like last year, and then I tried to understand what the growers are doing in Oklahoma, and I asked them who consider using seed treatments and who is using seed treatments, and actually a few of them, few growers are using seed treatments. I understand that because seed treatments will protect you only in that fall, but not after, like in the springs, till you need to apply fungicides, or maybe they use seed treatment especially for managing barley yellow dwarf so that they can reduce the population of aphids. But I believe in Kansas seeing more growers that are using seed treatments.
Yeah. We have one more question. It says, are you looking at any Brix numbers and the severity of disease infections?
Any Brix number?
Yeah, if you need to read it, you can click on that Q&A at the bottom of the screen, if that would help you to kind of see what they're asking.
Tara, yes, I see. What do you mean by Brix number?
Let's see if,
Maybe I'm not sure.
oh, I believe Tara is going to explain. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'd just been doing some reading and talking to people that they had been seeing that they do like that Brix analysis like on the leaf tissue and stuff. And if their Brix numbers are higher, then they're not getting like the disease infection and that sort of thing because their plant is healthier. And I didn't know if you guys were doing any testing or anything. That way you're looking at that, like if we're missing something in the nutrient of the plant to keep it healthier type of thing. So then we don't get diseases or anything that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we actually don't do that. Like for us, like in a breeding program, or like we look at, do we see symptoms of the disease or not? And basically, the higher we have different scales for different diseases. So basically, we try, it depends on what you are looking at. Is it for like a variety that is growing in a grower fields, or if it's a breeding line in the breeding pipeline? So we basically look at each disease, because we try to breed for each disease separate. And for growers, they usually try to see whether they have that disease. If they cannot diagnose it, then they can send it to us, and then we can tell them what disease it is, and then try to help them make a decision on the management. So
So you focus a bit more on
Yeah,
plant.
but I would like to learn more about.
Yeah, I wrote that down myself
Yeah.
because I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting question, Tara. Thank you.
Yeah.
But if anyone thinks of any questions here in the next 4 or 5 minutes, feel free to throw them into the Q&A or the chat. Please make sure that you fill out the survey at the end of the week. Let us know if you like this new format with having invited guest speakers. And that really helps us drive our crop hour series year to year. Tomorrow we will be talking about corn diseases with mostly a focus on tar spots. So if you're also in the corn industry, feel free to pop in tomorrow at 10 o'clock Central Time, and we will hear from Dr. Mandy Bish about corn diseases. Otherwise, we'll keep this on until 11 o'clock, and then we will close crop hour. Thank you all for attending today.